I don't believe in cold calling because I don't take cold calls myself anymore. If I have a number on my phone that I don't know, I do not answer it. I will send it to voicemail, then I'll send a text and say, sorry, I've missed your call. Who is this, please? And then if it's somebody that I actually do want to speak to, of course I'll call them back. But if it's just an absolute outright cold call, I won't take it. So I think...
Welcome to the Resilient Recruiter Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Whitby. Today, we're joined by Lysha Holmes.
If you become known as the best in what you do, and you are only working with the best candidates, you ain't working at 15%. You're not even working at 20%. So that's even just doing the same job, working smart on the best people. Why are we all working 16, 17-hour days when you can work smart?
Lysha's recruitment journey started in 1988. Where she quickly became a top biller at a national agency. In 2005, Lysha founded her own rec-to-rec agency, QUI Recruitment. QUI stands for quality, urgency, and integrity, which are her guiding principles. And any French speakers listening will also know that it means who in French.
That's the day I fell in love with recruitment, because to actually almost sit in the really privileged seat of a rec-to-rec, you are sat, I don't want to say above the industry, but you have this bird's eye view that is so unique and privileged and special. Your peers are coming to you to either seek the best talent for them and grow strategically with them as partnering your client base, or it's a fellow recruiter that are coming to you because they are too worried or they need that confidentiality.
In 2020, she launched the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast, which is now in its 5th season with a global audience and live shows. Lysha's a well-being advocate who champions mental health. She's a co-founder of the Women in Recruitment Leadership. She promotes sober living since 2017. She's also been a judge for the Recruiter Award since 2020.
I put my flag in the sand 10th of June 2017, where I went out with my best friend and I was just like, actually, I don't really want this. And that's it. From then it was very, very challenging. And for anyone who is on day 1 or day 1,000, it was a very challenging thing to do. Our society drinks, it's just part and parcel. As soon as the sun comes out, everyone's having barbecues, popping open the beer, whatever. Very quickly, what I realised is that it was absolutely underpinning all my anxiety as a person. And what I didn't realise is that Lysha Holmes is actually not an anxious person at all. And Lysha Holmes is actually very calm.
Lysha, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for that gorgeous introduction. Just a slight possible typo on my side. I'm not quite that old. I joined in 1998. 1988. 1988. I was still a teenage girl at high school. Of course you will.
I'm sorry, my dear. I absolutely...
It feels like that long, Mark. It really does. Thank you. That was a really when I listen back to it, I'm like, wow, for someone who just happened to fall into this industry by accident, it's been a nice journey so far.
Do you know what? That typo was my fault.
That's
because
hilarious.
I was in Slack earlier today. I was sharing, we have a channel called Fun Stuff for our Slack, our team. And I posted a video clip in there of me from 1988 when I was 15. And 1988 was just in my brain. But of course, it was 1998. Apologies.
It was a great, 88 was a brilliant year. I was a year younger than you, but I actually started clubbing it in 1988. It was brilliant.
Oh my goodness.
Any Mancunians listening, DeVille's, The Venue. I never made it to the Hacienda Band on the Wall, which is where Oasis started. It was a brilliant year for music in Manchester. Anyway, slight digression there.
So it's cool speaking to a fellow podcaster, and of course we're LinkedIn pals. I feel like I've known of you for ages, but we've never had the chance to really sit down and have a proper conversation. So today we're going to make up for lost time.
Absolutely agree. And likewise, I've been, there's a plethora of recruitment podcasts out there, which I think is amazing because it's just this instant learning platform for anybody that wants to take their journey to the next level, whether they're starting out or they're a new founder or, they've been in it as long as I have. But I think yours is consistently, I was saying this to you pre-recording when we spoke in the week, that, yours stands out for me because I really like your interview style. I think you are very authentic, you're fun, and you don't seem prescriptive about what the actual theme's going to be about. It's just leaders sharing their expertise or their insights. And I think we're going to cover an awful lot today. And yes, I'm a very prolific podcaster now. My podcast is season 5. What started as oh my God, what am I going to do in COVID to keep connected to my clients is now just for me, I'm sure it's the same for you, it's one of the most joyful parts of my job. I just love it.
100%. And thank you so much for saying that about the Resident Recruiter. That I really appreciate it, especially coming from another podcaster where you know what this medium is. But yeah, absolutely, I agree. I just love, like, the podcast has been the best thing that I've ever done, honestly, in terms of having these deep and meaningful conversations with leaders, and it's a chance. Like, I learn from every person I speak to, and I'm sure I'm going to learn loads from you today. So, tell me,
It's a privileged seat, isn't it?
yeah,
And I just think that, and I know we've got lots to get through, but just on this point, I think when I'm hosting anybody on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast, we have an overview, a context, but we don't script it at all. And so I know I'm going to genuinely listen and learn. And I feel so empowered by the person that is sat in that chair. And for them, actually, very often it's them pushing themselves out their comfort zone. Very often your guests might never have done a podcast before. Not everyone's
true.
like us, who's
Yeah.
always putting themselves out there. But I just can't wait. And I think to talk about something that is my passion, something that I'm a huge advocate of, it's like, let's go, Mark. Let's do this.
Let's go. So briefly, how did you fall into recruitment?
So I actually failed my A-levels. I'll do a very potted history. Failed my A-levels and really disappointed my parents, my entire grammar school, where I'd been star pupil. That's what happens when you don't revise. But I look back now and realise I think I had deep anxiety. I think that hothousing 7 years of knowledge into a 3-hour exam is actually not the best way to test somebody. Certainly somebody like me that's quite an active communicator. So I managed to pimp myself into a college to do a business studies course and absolutely excelled. And during that, I did a placement in marketing. So my first proper job really was actually in marketing. I worked for a financial services institution, and then I went to work for a manufacturer. And it kind of led me down this marketing / sales route. So I'm actually a born marketeer. I actually did my Chartered Institute of Marketing diploma, which I think
that's cool.
We'll come back to, we'll pin that, because I think that's possibly why I have nailed the personal brand thing on LinkedIn so well, because I was trained properly in how to market. And then actually met another man, moved to Birmingham, as so often people move around because of their partner. And I found myself working in a very famous FMCG company called Britvic Soft Drinks, selling Pepsi, 7-Up, Robinsons. J2O was just starting, and I worked in their corporate sales team, and I loved it. It was brilliant. We did amazing training. It was proper corporate sales training. There was 30 people that all started on the same day, and you were in this brilliant team. But after 10 months of absolutely smashing my target and still earning the same bonuses, Joe Blogg sat there and did nothing but still sold the same, I opened the Grocer magazine. And the Grocer magazine had a job advert section, and it said, "Are you good at sales? Do you want to earn 100 grand a year?" And I was like, "Yes, please." And I literally picked up the phone in the sales office, and I dialed, and it was a rec to rec. And I didn't even know what the job was. And they said, "Oh, you sound great." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll come over." And I had to do this open day assessment, and they put me into 2 companies, one of which was Primetime Recruitment, which is now Cordant. And the other one was part of the S3 brand, the Computer Futures. And I went through the interview process, got offered both jobs. And I decided to go with Primetime at the time because it felt a bit more, at the time it was more boutique. They had probably about 500 consultants, but S3 was already by then a monster. And the rest is history. That's how I fell into it. That was December 7th, 1998.
Wow, that's hilarious. Thanks for sharing. I remember the Grocer magazine, and because we used to canvas for jobs from the job ads out of the Grocer magazine. And I also remember Primetime. I'm pretty sure when I first moved to the UK, I was going around agencies to find a sales job, and I'm pretty sure they
had a sales division. We need to talk off camera because I bet my best friend ran the sales division. So there you go.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So what was it about? Here we are all these years later, and you've not only had a career in recruitment, but you now recruit recruiters yourself. What was it that hooked you about this industry?
I think that knowing that I literally did fall into it very quickly, I hit the brick wall within about 3 months, and I'd had no training actually. Prime time were brilliant once you had your training, but for 3 months I kind of found my feet. But I was just fearless. I just used to pick up the phone and make an idiot of myself. I didn't care what questions I asked. So I think I'm a naturally curious person, and I'm really interested in people. And for me, being paid to be on the phone speaking to really interesting people who either were running their own businesses or were coming to me to find them a job, I was like, seriously, this doesn't actually feel like work. Even when maybe things went wrong in inverted commas, you screw up in your first year, you make mistakes, you don't make those mistakes again. Failure is a massive part of your learning experience as a recruiter, and you have to really screw up, I think, to become an even better recruiter. And it's about being humble. But I think I fell hook, line and sinker really deeply when I accidentally picked up the rec to rec desk, which my journey, so I spent 3 years in Birmingham, I was the top biller. I was just fearless. I used to headhunt all the best engineers. I used to walk around, because we were agnostic in engineering. So we used to do service engineers, but we'd equally do a quality design manager. But I'd walk around Birmingham and literally see a service engineer and go and give him my business card and go, come and see me at lunch. And he would. And the next thing you know, all his mates had come. So I just was fearless about it. To me, it was like, what's the harm in asking? So it really excelled. But then the man I'd moved down with, we had got married. We unfortunately got divorced. So I have a whole personal story going on. Didn't tell anybody for about 3 months that he'd literally walked out on me. He just disappeared, never came back. So I gave my notice, moved back to Manchester with Prime Time, but very quickly realised that I'd outgrown the company. It's a brilliant first company. It's like I saw it as my apprenticeship. Moved to a boutique called Fee Farah Jones, which is how we know Sanjay. Which is now the Aspire Group, and they had a Manchester office and they needed a manager. So they did media and advertising sales. I actually decided to set up a totally cold desk, very randomly, doing marketing and advertising agency recruitment, suits and creative, which is 2 different desks, and loved it. But then within my team, we had two people doing advertising and 2 people doing rec to rec. One of them, I won't go into huge detail, but I had to unfortunately exit him from the business. And I picked up his job. I had to pick up his activity because, it's the right thing to do. And I was like, this is what I've been waiting for. Doing rec to rec, that first placement that I did, it was actually my first placement was an MD, believe it or not. I placed an MD. And I still speak to him to this day. That was 22 years ago. And that's, to answer your question, that's the day I fell in love with recruitment, because to actually almost sit in the really privileged seat of a rec to rec, you are sat, I don't want to say above the industry, but you have this bird's eye view that is so unique and privileged and special that your peers are coming to you to either seek the best talent for them and grow strategically with them as partnering your client base, or it's a fellow recruiter, now leader, you create a peer group that are coming to you because they are too worried or they need that confidentiality. And that was the day that I fell in love with recruitment. And I cannot imagine doing another desk. So that was 22 years ago.
Wow. Great story. That makes total sense. So then you launched QUI Recruitment as a solo founder in 2005 while also raising your daughter. So what were the biggest hurdles early on and how did you navigate them?
So, QUI Recruitment is 20 years old this year. And it was, when I'd had Izzy, so Izzy's nearly 21 now, flexible working just wasn't a thing. I asked for it and it was, you can come back 4 days, but we'll have to make the guy so I managed 2 managers, we'll have to promote him and you can report into him. And I'm like, I'm not really sure that's how it works. And I just thought, I'm just going to go for it myself. And, I think I also had, I think looking back now, and it's with hindsight now, and it's knowing all the founders that I partner, and I place founders as well, that I knew deep down that I was secretly an entrepreneur, that I needed to run my own business. I knew that at some point, and that was the catalyst, having a baby. I had a year off. So I had no restrictive covenants. And I knew there was still a gap in the market for, at the time, we are talking a different landscape. There were probably 3 rec to recs in Manchester at the time. that nobody seemed to take the candidate on the journey. It always seemed to still be about, getting a retained assignment and trying to find somebody for that job. And I was just like, I still think the rec-to-rec model is unique. So I guess my initial challenges 20 years ago remain the same today, actually, although there's a whole lot more now, in that you're trying to because you're reversing that mindset and reframing what most of the recruitment industry does, which is the right way, which is getting the commitment from the client, ideally getting retained up front. I totally, advocate that. I'm flipping it. Nobody's paying me. That candidate is not paying me, obviously. But that was at that point the biggest challenge. But also, and I don't expect violins out at this. I was, a young mum. I'd had an emergency cesarean, so physically I was actually quite in quite a fragile place for quite a long time after it, and I used to have like repercussions. And being a young parent is really tough. And then not long after it, and actually then baby number 2 came along, Lilia, who now works at QUI, but we'll come on to that.
Cool.
Yeah, so she was born in 2007, had to think then. So the business was only 18 months old when she was born. And then navigating, having some time off, but still running a business. And actually what I did at the time, and this is something that I advise anyone who's a solopreneur, is that I had a really good friend who ran a sales recruitment company, again, solo business. And I said, if I was to pass you some key relationships I wanted 6 months off, well, can we do a split fee? And she said, absolutely. So I made 2 placements in the 6 months I was off, but you know what? It's better than getting nothing.
Absolutely. That's a good plan.
Yeah, I always advocate that. I'm a big believer in collaboration. So I think that to answer your question, I think the challenges that I faced are still present today in that, it's reframing what people's expectations of me as a rec-to-rec are. But I also think that, the recruitment landscape 20 years ago, yes, of course, it's different now. There's so many, obviously with the evolution that we're in, which is going at 100 million miles an hour because of AI and technology. But I think from a human perspective and from a how we deliver a service, it's just what people's expectations remain of me as a rec-to-rec. And I think that's where my role is to create a better expectation and to elevate and create best practice and actually do it even better than someone's expecting me. So it's almost like that under promise over deliver, which I think is really cheesy, but actually I live and breathe it. And I did then and I do now.
Okay. So a point on that, and I completely understand what you're saying about having to reframe what you do, how you work, and make sure that people's expectations are aligned. Don't recruitment companies make the worst clients? Because I feel like that would be a challenge in that, like, to me, it's obvious that you would treat your recruiter in the way that you would want your clients to treat you and your team, right? That just is so logical. And yet I feel like the pitfall, now, obviously there's a lot of companies to choose from. I'm sure you've partnered with great companies that do want to work in the right way. But Lysha, that must be frustrating working with recruitment agencies as clients.
Any recruiter can answer that question hand on heart and say there are some clients who are frustrating to work with. And I think that you have nuances of those who really understand what EVP is, who will hire, retain, benchmark, promote against that, and truly embody for me what a brilliant decision-making process looks like and what onboarding actually means, that it starts on the first interview. And those who couldn't care less. And so the ones who couldn't care less, you learn very quickly that's one thing that, with hindsight being my, huge advantage now with 20 years in business behind me, I learned to say no quicker. And I walk away from those businesses who are the latter. If you are not familiar with what EVP is, to me, it's what are those people that are working for? What is the reason they are working in your business? And if you cannot answer that question before you even embark on hiring, then you shouldn't be hiring yet. So I think it's understanding, these aren't just marketing words. These are words that these are values and behaviors that you should, and absolutely paramount, should be hiring and retaining against. So yes, of course, there are clients that frustrate the hell out of us, the ones who don't really articulate what their decision-making process is. Oh, can we just have a conversation with, oh, by the way, we just need to do this. And you just think, oh my gosh. And you give the benefit of the doubt. You learn that with, the tenure that you have as a rec to rec or as a recruiter generally. This isn't just unique to the rec to rec market, but because we're talking specifically about recruitment companies being the decision makers, yeah, you get those who, they are hypocrites. They would, and I will often push back and say, if this was your client doing this, getting to the end of an interview process and then reverting back to the original reservation from interview one, it's like, well, hang on, if that was the case, why did we just go through all that and put the candidate through that? I have always believed, and I think this is, again, something that I think does come with maturity and wisdom possibly. I'm not afraid to give that level of feedback. And I think where we are as an evolution, if we're going to talk about that, and I don't particularly want to talk about AI, but I know we'll come on to it, I'm sure, in terms of the impact of it rather than specific, is that if we are truly going to be around in a few years' time as recruiters, it's about the partnership and it's about the insight that we give and it's about the advice we give. This isn't about prompts of, can you tell me what the average salary is or commission scheme? I don't need to answer that question in a few years. I know I don't. But what I do need to answer is, this is the impact your decision-making process is having on your ideal talent. So I think it's being candid, it's, keeping that communication throughout. And I think when you're setting expectations at the start of any interview process, which for us is usually we have positioned a strategic hire into their business. This isn't them coming saying, we need 3 recruiters next week. We'll just go, great, well, there's loads of rec-to-recs. I'm sure they'll deliver on that. This is about me saying, right, we've got somebody who is wrapped up, who is not going to go on the market with anybody else. They're not going to go directly. They've got proven experience. They're fee earners. We call them fee earners. So it could be a biller. It could also be an MD, a sales director, somebody that will go and launch a new practice area. But we need to know what the process is going to be before you meet them. And that's it. How are you going to establish whether this person is right for your business? It doesn't need to be war and peace. Is it going to be informal? Are there going to be business plans? Are there going to be psychometric tests? Is it going to be over weeks and weeks and weeks, or is this going to happen rapidly? I want to be able to manage the expectation of my candidate. If every process was like that, my God, that would be dreamy. It would be blue sky. The reality is it isn't like that all the time. But if we can, as rec-to-recs, give as much input into that as possible, the ideal is that everybody's happy. I truly believe that the timescale is dictated by 2 stakeholders, the client and the candidate. All I can do is facilitate it to the best of my ability. But I think my advice would be that, don't be afraid to be candid. Don't sit there going, oh, I wish the client would do that. It's like, well, tell them that. That's what partnership means. You need to know that. You can't just, if they never know, how can they improve?
Well, this segues nicely into your values. So QUI stands for quality, urgency, integrity. How do you live those values in your business and how have they shaped your success?
So it's actually a really nice little story, and I'll keep it really brief. When I was on maternity leave and I knew I was going to be setting up on my own, I'd already resigned. I'd resigned in the July, actually on the day of the London bombings, which was, it's just one of those days where you just think, God, that was such a crazy. Why was no one answering the phone? Oh, that's why. Terrible. And this was probably about 2 or 3 months later where I was like, right, I'm going to, give myself the summer off. And my second ex-husband, who was basically, obviously children's dad, knew I was going to do this on my own. And I said, I don't want to call it my name. I want it to be about who I am and what I stand for. And he's like, that's a really good idea. And he said, he was really good actually. What do you actually stand for? And the first thing that came out of my mouth was integrity. And I mean, so much so I actually have it tattooed on my wrist in Hebrew.
Oh, wow, that's a commitment.
So it literally bleeds through me. That's the way I look at it. And then the next one was actually quality, because I'm a big believer in, I've never either run my desk or run my business on volume. It's always been on ratios, which is therefore quality. For me, it's not about how many interviews, it's the quality of the interviews, etc. So quality. And then I was like, right. And it was you. So it's the urgency in you. And I'm always really sort of pinicky about my definition of that. That doesn't mean I'm pressuring anybody. I don't pressure people. I don't sell. I don't make people make a quick decision. To me, actually, reflection is a really important part. But to me, the urgency is on how important it is to the client and the candidate. And we have a little, strapline. It's, that those are our values in each and every process, every single time. And, we live and breathe by it. So every single year I measure the business's ratios, and our placement ratio, so interview to placement ratio, and get ready with the decimal point here, is 1 in 1.15.
Wow, that's insane.
It's
You're
insane.
placing almost every candidate that you're presenting.
That we send out, but
Yeah.
we will only send them to 1 or 2 companies. Now, you get the odd candidate who will say, actually, this is my first ever move. I've been in my company 7 years. I'd actually quite like to meet 3 or 4. And you go, no problem. Do it all through me, please. And that's another salient point. We do ask for exclusivity from candidates. And it's a really important point, because very often when I share that on my LinkedIn, I get challenged on it, which I love. I don't want an echo chamber. I get challenged on that. Like, how can that be good for the candidate? Well, of course it is, because it means they are totally in control of where their profile's going. It means they are in total control of their diary, and they are not risking their profile being shared without their permission.
100%.
I'm afraid to say it does happen.
Lysha, okay, let's drill down on this, because I did warn you that we're going to take some tangents, right, when we have this conversation. So I've written down ratios. I want to circle back to that, because that's 100%. We teach that to our clients as well. It's so important, is as a measure of quality, as we want to improve our ratios. But candidate exclusivity, I'm on the same page as you, but I know that this is going to split our audience.
Yep.
Some people are going to go, well, yeah, definitely. And others are going to be like, ooh, how does that work? I don't know about that. So why do you believe? Now, of course, there's some caveats here, right? So you're only going to ask for exclusivity if you genuinely intend to do something with that candidate, right?
My gosh. I'm glad you made the caveat. Definitely.
Right. But why do you think this is important? And then how do you sell it to the candidate?
Well, I think there's 3 people that it's important to. So I'm going to go through each of those people, and to make it's not a flippant remark. We don't sell anything to anybody. People come to us. So I think it's important to give context. We are the only Rectorate that doesn't send in mails. We are the only Rectorate that does not headhunt. We are 100% inbound through referrals, which tends to be 60 to 70% of our business. We have been doing this a long time. And then the other 30 to 40% is through our LinkedIn. So it's through our personal brand. So we don't sell it, but we will ask for the exclusivity, because for us, it creates that momentum and that sense of partnership with the candidate. So I'll take the candidate as the first stakeholder in this. The benefit and the advantage, I've already kind of covered off, but I'll just reiterate it. If you are an experienced recruiter, you don't know who owns other companies. You don't know who investors are. You don't know who what potential acquisitions are happening. And if you have got a friend that works for Joe Bloggs down the road, you don't actually know that your boss isn't talking to them at the moment. So the level of small worldness, if that's even a term, of recruitment should not be underestimated. And I have seen it so many times in 20 odd years of Rectorec. So the first advantage and benefit to a recruiter or recruitment professional that we would say this is why you should work exclusively with one Rectorec is because you are absolutely guaranteed control of who is knowing about your profile. The second thing, let's be really crude for a minute, okay? We are not cheap. If you're a good Rectorec, you are charging a premium. You're not using job boards. You're not, doing what everyone else is doing. So, you can charge 20, 25, 30%, right? You are motivated to work on that candidate's behalf. So you can we call it a market appraisal. We never oblige any candidate to come on the market with us. We might say, look, we will actually give that advice back that maybe you should stay put. So it's almost like this free market appraisal. We are auditing where you sit in the market. This is where we think you should be presented in terms of salary. This is where you should be presented in terms of on target, potential equity, potential next steps in your career. And we won't push them to make that decision. And then I think the third, and this sounds, again, quite cheesy, but it makes it a much calmer, more enjoyable process.
For sure.
They are we are curating for them the best opportunities. Now, I'm going to just bring in here the usual contention that I get when I share this kind of pitch on LinkedIn, if you like, which is, well, what if the best company is one that's not on your portfolio? Well, first of all, I am capable of pitching out a candidate to a new business. I've been doing this a really long time. So, and in rec to rec, that is never an issue. If I was to ring you up and say, I've got somebody who's in your market, I know we've never spoken before, but can we have a conversation, and let's have a conversation around terms? 99% of companies say yes. It's as simple as that. It just blows people's minds, right? So to me, there's 3 distinct benefits. Now, if somebody's already having a conversation through a friend, we're not going to not work with them. But if they're already talking to 1, even 2 other rec to recs, we will literally say, look, you sound great. We'll signpost them, because that's what a good rec to rec should do. We'll signpost them and say, look, maybe these are the companies you should be speaking to. But what we're not prepared to do is go in a race with you, because I don't think that's good for anybody. And I have said that from day dot in rec to rec, right from when I started. And that's, even more important in a congested and saturated market, that we need to be elevating each other, not going against each other. So let me answer for the client then. Why is it beneficial to the employer? Because you're not ever going to get that situation of, well, hang on, they sent the CV last week. Oh no, they sent it last week. And there's 2 stakeholders, the 2 founders, and the rec to recs have each got a relationship with each founder. It does occasionally happen, right? But you're never going to feel that as a client. And there's nothing worse than putting the person that's paying you on the spot. As an employer, if you've got a rec to rec working with an exclusive candidate, that you're finding out about the best person in the market. You're not going to need to benchmark them, because they are bringing that potential business with them. They're bringing that value with them. And again, that 3rd benefit is actually the same as the candidate one. It makes for a much more enjoyable, calmer, better process. Simple as that. There's no pressure. And obviously,
anytime sorry, Lysha, I was just going to say, anytime you're in a race, quality is going to decrease, right?
It's like, if you're selling your house and you've got a really great estate agent, they're going to try and sell your house, right? But if you put 2 boards up, both of them go, well, can't be asked with that. Let's see who walks past. So you're just creating this. I do believe in competitive edge. I really do. But I think there comes a point where actually that doesn't make the candidate look great, in my opinion. And I think if you want to make yourself look like an elite candidate, why would you be working with more than 1 person, in my opinion? The benefits to you to me as a rec to rec, or to anyone that's thinking maybe this is what I should do with my candidates. And I think if you are in a perm market, particularly perm, and you are in a candidate, I don't want to say short, because obviously there's tens of thousands of recruiters out there, but a candidate-led market, particularly around commercial sales, that kind of thing, you do get to have the pick of the bunch. You really do. You get to have the pick of the bunch of the best candidates, and you then you begin to be regarded as, actually, that's the rec to rec I really want to work with, because you know that they'll only work with the best. I put that very clearly on my profile. I want to work with the best fee earners. That's it. And if I don't think somebody fits that brief, I will recommend them to go and do things themselves. And I think it's about, your time is really precious as a rec to rec. And whilst, and again, this is living and breathing the quality, urgency and integrity. It's that, where am I going to spend my time? Who am I going to actually be able to represent? Now, there's no quick wins in rec to rec. Occasionally you do. But it's about building that long-term strategy, that if I spend time going on, we call it at QUI Recruitment, we call them crusades. If I go on a crusade with somebody beyond 3 interviews, the chances are they're actually not as premium as I thought they were. We will say, we can't help you, but this is what you need to do. Do this to your LinkedIn profile. Go and contact these companies. I believe in karma. That's what will happen. So I wouldn't be able to work any other way. But it's interesting, because it's the total opposite to how I worked in my first recruitment job, which was the opposite. It was retained exclusive client and then go and headhunt the best candidates. But I think rec to rec is really distinct.
Great. So if I'm understanding correctly, your entire business model is candidate centric. So you're partnering with who you regard as the best individuals, fee earners, and then you're marketing them to the right employer that matches what they.
Yeah. And the portfolio that we've curated it's ever changing, and I hope we get to cover a little bit on BD, because I think BD is a really hot topic right now. And we never stop BDing. We never stop building our portfolio. We never stop adding clients to it, because, God, if the last 2 years hasn't taught anyone anything, anyone can go under at any time. This is, sometimes it's out of our control. So I believe, have curated an incredible portfolio of clients. We will only work with those who have an impeccable reputation. And I don't just mean Glassdoor. I mean those that are really ripping up trees in their markets, the hidden gems, the startups, the ones that have, maybe aren't as well known in the recruitment world, but they're very well known in their market, for example. And like I say, we don't just sit on our laurels. So if somebody comes to us and it's like, actually, I really need to go and work for X, Y, and Z company, and we've never spoken to them before, well, I'll just pick up the phone to X, Y, and Z, and that's it. To me, that's what true BD is, by the way.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk about true BD. And by the way, one aside, which I agree 100% with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the easiest way to increase your billings is only work with the right clients and only represent the right candidates. So in other words, only work on assignments that you have a high probability of success, and likewise the candidates that you have a high probability of placing. And so knowing who to say no to is, both on the client and the candidate side, a massive but under discussed element in how you actually can level up your billings. Because as you said, and in Rec Direct, I think it's true for all of our listeners, time is your most precious asset. It's finite. So are you spending time partnering with the right companies and the right candidates? Those decisions have a massive impact, right?
Well, they do. And you would look at your client base. You would, I guess, tier your clients. I'm presuming everybody's tiered their clients. You would do that with your candidates. How placeable is this candidate? If they're exclusive, straight away you think, right, okay, have they billed consistently? Where is their tenure? Where is their value? What's their, I'm going to say this, it's very subjective, but what's their likability? What are they bringing in terms of diversity? What other elements do they bring with them? And these are all elements that we score people on. And they're the ones that we will do a lot more work and do due diligence on and go on behalf of. And I just want to make a point here that what you've just said there was drummed into me. And I am going to absolutely shout out Paul Farah, who is the founder of Aspire Group. I think he's retired now, the ex-chief executive Fee Farah Jones. You can increase your fees, never mind make more fees. You can charge more to your clients if you work this way, because you truly are being a premium service. If you become known as the best in what you do and you are only working with the best candidates, you ain't working at 15%. You're not even working at 20%. So that's even just doing the same job, working smart on the best people. Why are we all working 16, 17-hour days when you could work smart? If you get one recruiter and you send them out to 1-2 companies and you're going to place them, there you go, bang, 10 grand, whatever the salary is, right? You times that by, I don't know, how many people can you work on at any time? I always say 12's a nice number for me, but I know other experts work on, say, 4 at a time. But if you can work on a reasonable number of people that have projects, that I see them as a project, that's how I see it, then you will consistently bill, but you will bill more than your counterparts.
Love it. So let's talk about BD, because in talking to recruiters and firm owners every day like you do, the way the market is right now, not in every sector, but I'd say it's definitely, client acquisition is the key right now. What is your approach to BD, and what do you think successful BD looks like?
I don't agree with that last statement. I think BD is always relevant, even in...
100%.
Do you know what I mean? I know I'm being facetious. I'm sorry. I have got a very, very naughty sense of humour. I'm pulling your leg. I think we should always be BDing. We should always be developing relationships. And that's with existing clients. That's with lapsed clients. I interviewed somebody yesterday and she spent... that her job was to spend... I think she spent a year reigniting old relationships, and she billed £500,000 just calling. I mean, her job was only 180. All she had to do is BD. She brought in £500,000 worth of vacancies that got filled just by calling lapsed clients that hadn't been called for 2-3 years. So I think that it's how we position this term, and business development to me is everything that you do in your process. It's when you are on the phone to a candidate and you are asking them, who do they want to work for? How many recruiters actually ask that question? I'm surprised a lot don't. Who do you actually want to work for? Because to me, that's my target list. That's my BD. Never mind who I'm thinking. It's who do you want to work for? That's BD. BD is being at a networking event, going to a podcast event and thinking, oh, there's somebody I really want to go and speak to. Hi, really nice to meet you. What did you think of the guest? Oh, gosh, how was your journey here? It'd be really nice to connect on LinkedIn. You share an article, you share a podcast episode with them. That to me is still BD because it's how you start to position yourself. The days I'm really sort of I do put my flag in the sand about this, given that I am what many would call an old school recruiter, but I'd like to think I'm very relevant. I don't believe in the cold call anymore. And I know that there's plenty of people that do, including my own business partner, Laura Dutton. She's a big believer in cold calling. I don't believe in cold calling because I don't take cold calls myself anymore. If I have a number on my phone that I don't know, I do not answer it. I will send it to voicemail, then I'll send a text and say, sorry, I've missed your call. Who is this, please? And then if it's somebody that I actually do want to speak to, of course I'll call them back. I'm not an idiot. But if it's just an absolute outright cold call, I won't take it. So I think for me, business development is about a whole holistic approach, which includes personal branding on LinkedIn. As I've already alluded to, that's very powerful for my brand and for QUI Recruitment. And it's all of it. You can't just do one of it. You can't just sit on LinkedIn and post out stuff. You have to pick up the phone. You have to go and see your clients. How many people listening, hand on heart, spend at least a day a week seeing their clients in person? Or if it's not viable and you do a global desk virtually, all you're doing, you're not going out to get a job. You're just going to put yourself in front of your client. What are your pain points right now? How are you? How are you coping as a leader right now? There's a lot going on externally. The world's imploding politically. How is that impacting you? How are you coping? What can I do to support you? You have no idea how important that is as a business development strategy because they will remember you when they are hiring next. They will remember you and the way you made them feel as a leader when you are pitching your next candidate in. I promise you that. So for me, business development is not so much a thing that we do. It's encompassing everything that we do in recruitment. And I'm sorry if that makes some people think you're talking nonsense, Lysha. I'm sorry. I think for me, it should be second nature. And if we look back over the last 2-3 years and the amount of people that have exited the industry because they either weren't given the tools to, let's hold our hands up, in the boom years, no one got trained in it. If you are somebody that is sat there going, I don't really enjoy that side of it, you need to go and get another job in a different industry because that is the job. The job is business development all the time. I hope that answers the question, Mark.
Absolutely. So the job is business development all the time. And also everything is business development. You weave business development into the entire process and throughout the day with all the conversations you're having. So do you know what? One thing I love about this business, there's not one right way to do it, right? There's a lot of different variations and people do need to, I think there's some fundamentals that are universal, but then the style and the style and the particular ways that you do it may be different. So it's funny you say you don't believe in cold calling. We're in the process of delivering a course, which is called Cold Calling Confidence. And the reason we're doing that course is because people are asking us, our clients are asking us, that's a skill set that, has kind of been dying out in recent times. And we had just earlier in the week, we had a panel of 3 of our clients who are billing millions of dollars between them and where cold calling is a key go-to-market strategy. So I'm curious for you, and by the way, my definition of a cold call is, it's not that they don't know who you are or you've never had any other interactions with them. It's they're not expecting your call, right? And they're not an existing client and they're not expecting your call. So it's not a scheduled appointment, okay? What channels are you leveraging in order to connect with potential clients? Let's say you have one of your top billers that you're representing in the marketplace. What are the typical channels that you would leverage in order to connect with those decision makers and get them interested in your person.
It's interesting that you say that, because actually your definition is probably how I would define cold calling too. I'm not talking about, please may I speak to the person responsible for, which is how we did it in the 90s, right? And I also just want to say that the reason that it's so important to most of my customers as well, who, they don't understand why Gen Z don't seem to want to pick up the phone. It's because, we are talking a totally different society to the one that, when you were to ring up, your friend's dad and say, can I speak to Joey so he can come out and play football with me? Or, even more embarrassing, can I speak to the boy that I'm actually going on a date with,
Right,
and I have to now speak to his mum or dad? They don't have to do that. It's a different level of communication. And I think it's really important that leaders listening understand that it's not part of their DNA really to actually have to do that. So what we should be doing, instead of demonizing Gen Z and saying, oh, they don't want to pick up the phone, they're brilliant at social selling. They're amazing at social selling. Let's incorporate how they sell and almost learn off each other. I think positioning a Gen Z with, with the millennial, for example, because they're the last generation that have kind of straddled both worlds. What can we do to support you while you are sort of understanding and becoming confident with the phone, which I'm sure is what that course you're talking about is about. It's that confidence. But let's learn from them, right? So it's about elevating somebody's confidence. So I do just want to make that point, because I think, there are plenty of Gen Xers who don't like picking up the phone and cold calling either. So it's not a generational thing per se, but actually as a society, it's a society we've created that we don't have to ring anybody anymore. So anyway, in answer to your question, what do we do? I will pick up the phone. If I know that I've got a client that knows somebody in that customer, I'll ask them to introduce me. I'm a firm believer in recommendation. I think that it's so powerful. I'll always ask that person first. I would never go straight to target and say, oh, I know Mark. And start name dropping that. I think that's really awful. I think I would ring you and say, Mark, I'm really keen to speak to Joey. I don't know why I keep saying Joey. Who's Joey? But I'm really keen to speak to Joey.
Joey Tribbiani.
Joey Tribbiani. Oh yeah, we're showing our age now. We've got a candidate that I'm working with exclusively, and having done some research, I do believe that Joey's a brilliant client potentially to speak to. I don't know Joey. I'd really appreciate it if you would either introduce me, or if I'm okay to mention your name. That conversation with you takes 5 minutes. It's meant you feel involved in it. You're more likely to probably pick up the phone to Joey and go, let me tell you about Lysha. She's going to be calling you. I hope that's okay. Or even if it's dropping you a message on LinkedIn. It takes 5 minutes. And that to me is much more powerful. And I would say that's probably 80% of how we would do an intro if it was a new business development requirement that we had. And
love that, Lysha, by the way. That's a brilliant approach. So who do I know who knows that target individual? And, let me speak to them first, and either they will mention me or I just can name drop them, but we've already had a conversation.
It's so powerful. And don't underestimate the true mathematical probability that you are going to know somebody in common. Even if it's really loose, you are going to know somebody in common. And if it's not somebody that you could pick up the phone to that's that conduit, drop them a message on LinkedIn and say, look, I hope you don't mind. Would it be okay if you either drop me, if I do a LinkedIn connection request to them, can I mention your name? Would that be okay? Who is going to say no? Nobody's going to say no. But I just think it's really simple. It's really effective. It creates a warm approach, and it's powerful. And actually what you've done is people like to feel needed, like to feel important. And I've made you feel important because you've done something really nice. And I do believe in the power of, passing good on. And then, of course, LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn is, a Rec to X dream. Let's face it. It's our biggest tool, isn't it? Because that's where all the recruiters sit, right? And it's just really easy. Occasionally you might do a round robin of your active candidates. Occasionally, do I get anything from that? Not really. But it's the best way to do your research. It's the best way to understand from a, endorsement point of view, whether that decision maker's right. It isn't rocket science, Mark, what we do really. I think it's, utilizing your prowess as a human being, a human connection, but also using the technology to do your research. It's very easy to combine the two, but most people kind of they underestimate the power of the first one.
That is a golden nugget right there. Thank you, Lysha. That was really, really good. And I think underutilized, right? And it's when you explain it, it's like, duh, of course we should do that. But we don't always do the things that make sense. We do things the hard way. So,
well, I think it's not. I think it's that, and I also think, and that, this isn't me being pedantic as a Gen Xer, but I think that it's so easy to hide behind technology. Generally, it's so easy to get caught up in the automation. It's so easy to get caught up in the the AI and these messages that people get. And we are now in a position where I think there is so much automation. How many times do people actually respond? And I think if you are sending what looks like an automated message to your target client, even if I was to then mention you, they're probably going to ignore you. But who's going to ignore that phone call or that the reason for my email is this? They won't. So I think it ironically, at a time where we are, becoming automated as an industry, what will set you apart, I think, as a recruiter is that human element.
For sure. Absolutely. And look, automation can be a huge time saver and really powerful, but if you don't do it well, it actually backfires, right? So it has to be done the right way. I know you didn't want us to talk about AI, but I do need to ask, Lysha, because you work with so many great recruitment businesses and you're in daily contact with excellent recruiters, what are the best use cases of AI that you've seen or heard of from your clients and the things you've noticed?
It's a really good question, actually. I mean, obviously, there's an absolute boom in what's available to you. And I think I'm almost going to unanswer that by saying recruiters love to buy stuff. We're magpies. We like to try all the shiny stuff. And if I think back to even a year ago when we were talking about AI, it was disruptive. That we all love that word, don't we? Disruptive. Oh my God, we all need to do this. It's like panic. What we're doing. Oh my God, you need to get your systems in place. You need to do this, otherwise you're going to get left behind. And it's like, right, I think now where we're at, the next trajectory is what don't we need? And that's where it's interesting because I ask every single client, I always have, what's your CRM? That was like a basic question, but now it's like, what AI are you using? And I'm not joking. I would say at least a third have done nothing yet.
Interesting.
Nothing. They're not interested in automating their process. What they're using, I mean, and then I'll go, really? You're not? And they'll go, oh, well, you know what, we're using a note taker, whichever brand it is. They're using a note taker. And I'm like, so you are using AI? Because that's what we would do. We would use a note taker. Because to me, it's like, why wouldn't you use a note taker?
Absolutely. That one is a no-brainer. Everybody should be.
That one's a no-brainer. Yeah. Like, I guess we're using ChatGPT to do this, and this. And it's like, so actually you are using it. But I think where there's, I guess the dichotomy is that where recruitment founders are almost flummoxed as to what the impact will be, for example, on their CRM, because a lot of people have got so much data. If they're a mature business, post 5 years, I would say, then that's quite daunting, that level of data migration in terms of, how many companies we've spoken to, honestly, Mark, this year, who've just gone, we've got tens of thousands of candidates and the data is not relevant. And I'm like, I feel you. So I guess that comes down to how much data you put into your database. I don't want this to get really boring. So to answer your question, I think I need to keep it an agnostic answer because it's all very new, as everything is in recruitment. You can't answer it with, like, what's the best commission scheme? It's like, it really depends on a million factors. It really depends on what your business is, how much interaction you have with your actual community, with your clients, your candidates, your advocates, because, we have advocates in our communities, not just customers. And for me, where I see AI now, genuinely, and I'm a massive fan. I don't know if you've ever read Yuval Harari. He wrote *Sapiens*, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I listen to his podcast, and I'm really like Mo Gawdat and all those people. I think that we will use it to get rid of all the boring stuff, all the stuff we hate, all the admin stuff that we hate. But what we will never use it for, in my opinion, which is where I think there's some that are doing this, is that outreach. It's so boring. It's terrible. The companies that seem to be excelling and propelling themselves probably are recruiting in the AI space. Little tip. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're automating their entire process. They're still going out and doing client meetings. They're going to all the events. They're going to San Francisco. They're going over to Europe. So actually, it's utilizing it, but not forgetting the human interaction. And my word of caution is we can get so sold to that you end up having all these subscriptions, you're paying for all this stuff, and actually, are you using it? Because I'm guilty.
I'm paying for so many things I don't use, Lysha.
I know.
That's,
so am I.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, I sign up for a year because it's cheaper to sign up for a year. And then I'm like, I've not actually used it. And that's not just in business, that's generally. So that's the point, isn't it, Mark? So I think for me, I know you do have a lot of founders listening and leaders listening. Don't buy it unless you actually think you can utilize it. And for me, the AI should be the stuff that we do. It's the automation, it's all the note taking, it's the summaries, but don't lose the human interaction. You just can never do that. Why would you do this job if you wanted to do that?
And just to underscore that, I love your idea of 1 day a week or the equivalent of being in front of your clients, whether that is physically or virtually. It's having client meetings like that I never understood that. To me is my favorite part of the job when I was a recruiter.
Brilliant.
Then why wouldn't you do that? You get so much from those conversations. That's brilliant that you re-emphasize that.
You want to understand a client's EVP. You want to understand a culture. Get in front of your client. Go and sit in their reception. Get there a bit early. Then you'll really know what it's like in there. You'll know whether they're on the phone or whatever it is that they do if you're not a rec to rec, obviously. Most of your listeners, I'm guessing, aren't rec to recs. Go and listen. Go and see, what their environment's like. Go and see the design studio, whatever it is. Because you will never forget that then. I promise you that level of intellectual property that will stay in your brain by physically being in that company, they will go right to the top. And no company's ever going to say no to seeing you. And who do you think their loyalty will be to? And do you know what? Let's face it, life is so miserable otherwise. Go and have some fun. We
What a
do
concept.
It's a concept. Let's be fun together.
We're not going to have time to talk about ratios, and potentially that's a boring conversation anyway. I think you said all that needs to be said on that. But what I would ask is, how many client meetings do you think we should be doing a week for most recruiters?
So, I guess it just depends on logistics and whether you are doing it in person or whether you're doing it virtually. I think if you're doing virtual ones, you could be doing 2 a day. I think that if, always block an hour, especially on things like Zoom or Teams or whatever, where you've got, essentially for limit, if you've not got a business account, always do an hour, because then you've got time for the niceties. You've got time to sort of get to know them a little bit and, be asking them about how they're doing, etc. So I think I see no reason why, 5 to 10 a week. And I'm not talking new, combining new and existing.
New and existing, yeah.
I want to catch up. I would say the ratio probably more weighted towards existing. Why would you go and spend all your energy trying to get new business when you've got your existing business? So I would say 70-30. That's probably our ratio, 70-30. If it's in real life, I think personally, anything more than 3 physical meetings a day, and you are probably by the 3rd meeting a little bit brain dead, especially the one after lunch. So we tend to do 3 in the day. We've occasionally done 5 in a day, and honestly, we come out and we're literally like zombies. And I just think it's a bit like a recording day. You don't want to I'm not saying not perform, because I'm not saying it's a performance, but actually you want to engage, you want to be active listening all the time. And I think that's within the reach of everybody listening, that, that's the joyful part. That's the fun part. That's the part that's why you should be doing this job. And apart from anything else, get out and see your candidates that you've placed in your existing clients. Go and have a hug with them. Great for your socials, great for LinkedIn. How wonderful. And I tell you what, every time we go and see a client, we always get a lead of some sort, whether it's, I meant to tell you my friend's looking for a new job, or you bump into somebody, or actually I wanted to have a conversation with you because we've got a confidential role we want to talk to you about. Let me just shut the door. Those conversations can't happen if you're not actually with your client.
100% agree. Lysha, I do want to ask you, take this just in a slightly different direction for the few minutes we have left, which is, I know that, I don't know the story, but I read on your LinkedIn, you're very candid about your journey. I understand you decided to become sober in 2017. Could you tell that story a little bit, and what the decision-making behind that was, and what impact that's had in terms of, your health and your business success and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I'll try and keep it as succinct as possible. Like most people, I had a normal experience with alcohol through my teenage years. Recruitment is one of those industries where it's, champagne and razor blades, isn't it? You celebrate, you commiserate. Very, I would say, normal, healthy, the odd glass of wine at the weekend. And then during my late 30s, my now ex-husband set up a brewery. So it's a slightly unique situation.
Okay.
And so he would then bring home his samples during the week, and I wasn't particularly an ale drinker, so I think, well, I'll have a glass of wine with you. And then it kind of, like anything, it becomes a norm during the week. The weekend, your level of sort of perception of what I see as a nice drink became 2, 3, 4 glasses. So over a period of time, it was getting to the point where I knew I was not coping with the alcohol I was consuming. I am a bit of an all or nothing person, I guess. Like, there's a lot of recruiters out there like that. We're very passionate people, and it reached a head actually in 2016. So I could put my sober date as 2016, but I basically made myself ill over a summer. I don't think I had a day where I didn't drink for about 3 months, and then there was one night, we all have those nights, and I just thought I physically couldn't drink. So then what I call my moderation period for 10 months. In that time, it was all peer pressure drinks. I think I had 6 drinks in that time. And then I put my flag in the sand, 10th of June 2017, where I went out with my best friend, and I was just like, actually, I don't really want this. And that's it. From then, it was very, very challenging. And for anyone who, is on day 1 or day 1,000, it was a very challenging thing to do, because our society drinks. It's just part and parcel. As soon as the sun comes out, everyone's having barbecues, popping open the beer, whatever. In recruitment, it's, you go to any event, most of it is alcohol. Nowadays, I think there's a bit more alcohol-free. Alcohol-free wasn't really a readily available sort of market then, but it is now, which I'm pleased to see. But very quickly, what I realised is that it was absolutely underpinning all my anxiety as a person. And what I didn't realise is that Lysha Holmes is actually not an anxious person at all. And Lysha Holmes is actually very calm. So I called sobriety my freedom, because it allowed me to really, truly become myself. And then if I think about my energy levels, I've always been a naturally very positive, optimistic, energetic person. But
really,
I think,
I've never guessed that.
No, I know. But I say now that alcohol stole me. Maybe not for most of my life, but certainly the last few years it did. My hangovers were horrific. They went on for days. And I think as you get older, and I know we don't have time to talk about perimenopause, but it's important to make the point that it is actually one of the most damaging things to females going through the menopause. It's scientifically proven. Alcohol, it literally destroys your hormone levels and raises your cortisol. So it's just the worst thing you can do. So I'm very pleased that I did that for myself when unbeknownst to me, I was actually already perimenopause. But I think in terms of, and it's, not losing the audience here, that the impact it's had on me as a business owner is that it allowed me to survive in COVID, because if I had been drinking in COVID, I actually dread to think what route I would have gone down. I think it would have robbed me of my creativity, which I now know is my natural flair. That marketeer of 1990, whatever I was, 1994, I graduated with my CIM diploma. I am a very creative person. It's where the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast has come from. It's where I get all my ideas. It's where, when I co-founded the Women in Recruitment Leadership was my idea. It's my baby. And I knew I couldn't do it on my own, which is why I asked Mel Sedgley and Alison Humphreys along. But it's my baby. And that came from my creative brain. That would never have come out of me if I'd still been drinking. And it's not a dramatic thing to say that I think if we were to, look back on bad things, bad events in our lives, most of my bad decisions were surrounded by alcohol. And I think that it's so wonderful now that it's a safe space, particularly in the recruitment community, but broadly speaking, that actually I was a pariah in 2017. I would go on nights out, I'd go to functions, and there would be people that would just go on and like, you're still not drinking? Like, no, I'm still not drinking. Now I just think it's becoming the norm. And I think that, we know that from a statistical point of view, Gen Z are drinking less than any generation before them. It's partly because of the cost, let's face it, and they're broke. But actually, I think that wellness and fitness has now become the new sexy thing to do, hasn't it? It's the whole high rocks culture, which I'm not part of, by the way. Too old for high rocks, but I go to the gym. So I've replaced, like a lot of people who like a dopamine hit, which is what it's all about. I love moving my body. So I've discovered exercise. unbeknownst to you, actually, I didn't tell you this pre-recording, but I have gone sugar-free.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, which is actually, let me tell you, I think that could become the new thing because it's all around ultra-processed food is killing us. It's literally killing the UK and US, right? And when I decided to go sugar-free, it was largely due to, as a 50-year-old in the UK, you have a health check, and I was pre-diabetic. Terrified me because my dad ended up with diabetes and he then passed away from pancreatic cancer. I was like, right, I need to put this in place now. So I decided to go sugar-free from the 1st of Jan. And when I actually looked at anything that was manufactured other than real whole food, everything has sugar in it. So I've unintentionally removed ultra-processed food. I don't have anything processed at all now. And my gut health is amazing. My sleep is amazing. And dare I say, I feel that I look better. I feel better in myself. And I think that is when I've shared it a couple of times on LinkedIn. And actually, there's a little small rumbling that I think this could be the next sobriety movement. Because the well-being is what will make you endure. And look, listen, if I was listening to this as 24-year-old Lysha when I started out in recruitment, I'd have gone, yeah, bore off. But actually, I don't think that's where we're at as a society. I think people are going, do you know what? If the food industry are poisoning us with all the ultra processed stuff, and like if it doesn't look and feel like the original food, that is ultra processed. Get yourself a jacket potato, tin of tuna, stick some cheese on it. That is your best fast food you can have today. In fact, I might go and make that.
Lysha, we're going to have to do a part 2. I feel like there's so many things I want to ask you and we're out of time. We didn't talk about personal branding, marketing, generating inbound business, so many other things. And also this little segment we've done on well-being. Like I want to learn more about that. I quit drinking in my early 20s, strangely enough. Wow. And every once in a while I'll have a drink and then I remember why I don't like it. But it is challenging from a social point of view, especially because I think in our culture, a lot of socializing revolves around drinking. So it is not easy, but I'm sure that your journey, thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think your journey will resonate with many people who might recognize elements of what you shared in themselves and realize maybe I'm more, using this more than I even realized, and what impact
it could be anything. It could be overeating, it could be sugar products, it could be alcohol. I mean, it could be drugs. Let's face it. And I think I've always been very open, and I would love to come back and do a part 2, by the way, because I know we could talk for hours. Clearly, I think that if you need people like me on social media who overshare, and I know I'm an oversharer, but I always say and I always maintain on these when I share it as a personal post, like if it resonates with one person, if one person is affected by my story, that is enough. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing it for the vanity metrics. I really am not. And so when I share my sobriety journey, when I share my sugar-free journey now, when I talk about perimenopause, when I talk about mental health, if one person drops me a message and go, I now feel seen, job done. That's all I'm doing it for. And, I think maybe because I'm an older woman and I've gone through, and, we've not even talked about my personal journey, I absolutely live and breathe by, I don't really care. I'm just going to do it anyway because this is my life. And I wish more people lived like that. So if just to finish that point, if someone is listening and it's like, it is really hard. It's so, if you're quite new in a recruitment company and actually it is all drinks and you don't really want to drink, don't drink. Just go and get yourself a sparkling water. Go and ask the bar person to pour it into a nice glass for you. No one will care. The reality is no one will care. No one really is watching you. So just do what pleases you and don't be afraid to just be yourself. From a wise old owl.
That's a great point to end on. Lysha Holmes, absolute pleasure. Enjoyed that. I knew I was going to enjoy it, but that was genuinely a lot of fun. And I would like to do a part 2. So let's make it happen.
I will definitely come back, and thank you so much. And to anyone who, if it's anything's resonated with anybody listening, my DMs are always open in LinkedIn. So happy to receive anything. So thank you, Mark. I've really enjoyed being on too. It's been great.
All right. Take care. Have an awesome weekend. Take care.
You too.
Thank you for listening to The Resilient Recruiter. I know how busy recruiters are, so I'm honored that you're investing this time with me each week. I don't take your attention for granted. That's why I'm going all out to deliver value for you here, real insights you can apply to improve your business. And if you really want to help me to reach a wider audience and impact more people, please consider leaving the show a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you leave me a review, please reach out and let me know so I can thank you personally. Please hit the subscribe button and I'll see you next time.